where my whole fascination with self-defense and martial arts kicked off was I was about 12 years old. I was leaving our elementary school, and up the street they had just built a new high school the year earlier. It had just opened up, and I was going to be going to school there next year. And I'm leaving this baseball game. I'm all alone, and I'm kind of like skipping through the parking lot, and these two kids are on the sidewalk, and they turn in when they see me and they go, "Hey kid." I go, "Yeah." And I stop and I'm all like, we just finished playing baseball. I'm excited. I'm going to walk home. And they go, "You go to school here?" And I go, "Yeah." And they go, "When do you go to high school?" They point, they gesture. I go, "Next year." They go, "Oh, you're going to high school next year, this one?" They go, "Yeah." They go, "Well," and they look at each other. And in that moment, I go like, something's wrong. And they grab me and spin me, put me in like a full Nelson, like the, arms pinned behind my back. Right. And I'm like, ah. And the kid in front goes, "Welcome to high school." And he does like that Sugar Ray Leonard bolo punch.
Oh God.
And he just sucker punches me in the gut. Well, everything went into super slow motion as this happened. And this is an interesting thing, like the physiology of stress can activate what's called tachypsyche. And this is from survival learning research, where your brain starts to process things so quickly that things appear like they're going in slow motion. Right. And you probably experienced that at some point. Everyone has. It's usually like a car accident or something dramatic, where you're not really sure how this is going to turn out, and things suddenly slow down. Well, it's your brain is just processing things so quickly, so that it's trying to identify exactly what the threat is. Anyways, this goes into slow motion, and as I anticipate impact, Peter, I scream, and I make this joke often. I don't mean to disrespect anyone, but I tell this joke, like I screamed better than my sister would have screamed, right? I had two sisters, and I would tease them and they'd scream and all this stuff. But I screamed like, I was like, "Ah," and, right. And it scared me, but it scared them. And I felt it. It was fascinating. I hope you guys dig the story, because it's very funny. I felt as I was screaming in that moment, remember, I'm like 12 years old, 12 turning 13. No study of martial arts or self-defense, but I felt when I screamed that the guy's grip changed. I felt like I had scared him by my fear. And as the punch hit, and you know this from your training and boxing, stuff like that, if you're going to take a body shot, you're not going to go like this and go, "Okay, hit me." You're going to, okay. If you're doing body tempering, you're going to go, "Okay, go ahead, hit me." Like you tighten up, you lock up. Right. Well, I was as tight as I could be. I mean, the guy's pulling on my arms. I'm trying to get away. You could have hit me with a baseball bat then. I didn't know that. He hits me, boom. I don't feel a thing, but my psychological system was anticipating so much impact that I screamed, and I felt the guy loosen up, and I immediately knew intuitively I need to scream again, even though I'm not hurt. So I yelled again. I pretended like my ribs were broken and I couldn't breathe. I went, "Ah, ah," and the guy let go of me, and I could see them look at each other, and they took off. And I'm on the ground on all fours going, "Ah, ah." And when they turned the corner in the tree line and they were gone, I kind of like sat up, fixed my shirt, went, "What a bunch of fucking assholes. What the hell was that?" And I went home, and this is the whole point of the story, but why I'm explaining it in such detail to your listeners is because the Be Your Own Bodyguard system that I developed decades later drew on some of these lessons that I discovered then through intuition. Nobody teaches this stuff. Feigning pain, feigning fear, and using that in a Trojan horse metaphor to manipulate the behavior of your threat, whether it's an attempted rape, whether it's a robbery. You can mitigate the violence by manipulating the behavior if you understand the psychology of the bad guy. But we can get into that later.
Yeah, fascinating.
I get home, and my dad says, "So, how was the game?" When, I said, "I was good." He goes, "What else? Anything exciting happened today?" "Yeah, I got beaten up by two guys." And he looks at me, he goes, "Was it a pillow fight?" Like because I have no marks on me, right? So he says, "What is a pillow fight?" And I said, "No, Dad, seriously, I got beaten up. These two guys jumped me." And he said, it was like 1972, turning 73. He said, "Well, you got to learn some martial arts." And that was the first time I'd heard the term martial arts like that. But I grew up, I was a Bruce Lee junkie, Robert Conrad junkie. But, you know, when you're 6 or 7 years old, watching the original Wild Wild West, watching the original Green Hornet,
Yep.
You don't know what you're watching, but I was transfixed by this artistic violence, like, you know, Bruce Lee kicking somebody in the head as the Green Hornet, and Robert Conrad slipping somebody and throwing a hook punch and dropping the bad guy. I was fascinated by that stuff. 73, Bruce Lee passes away, and of course there's the martial art revolution, right? And so I immediately signed up. There was only one school near us, a Taekwondo school. So my first actual official martial art was Taekwondo. Fell in love, worked out 7 days a week. Got into a confrontation when I was 15 with a kid in school, and he had shoved me up against the wall. And I kept hearing in my head as I was trying to figure out the range, because I was jammed up against the wall. I heard this voice: "He's too close to kick. He's too close to kick." And I didn't know any striking, because Taekwondo is not a striking art. And we got in a fight. I ended up, it was messy, and it was shitty. I dominated, but it was fearful and accidental. And afterwards, I immediately signed up for boxing lessons, thinking, well, if I'd known something about firing a punch, I could have done something. I ended up throwing the world's shittiest jab that hit the guy, and then he immediately came back with an overhand right. We get into this crazy movement, but it's curious. And again, I point out, I'm trying to quickly take my journey to when I started teaching and how this behaviorally based self-defense system evolved. Is like everybody else, I was looking for like tools in my toolbox to solve problems. If only I'd known how to box, if only I'd known how to grapple, if only I'd known jujitsu. And that's the danger. You know, I didn't know this. Years later, 1980, I started teaching professionally. And
what were you teaching at that point, Tony?
Well, I was working for my father, sweeping the back of his import-export facility and working as a shipper. But I was a martial art fanatic. So I'm always working out. I'm always walking around hitting stuff. We get these big boxes come in, and I would actually beat the crap out of these boxes once I unpacked them, like Rocky would hit, sides of beef, right? Like Stallone. And they were so huge, Peter. They were like massive, like literally you could stand in them. They were like 1 3/4 corrugated cardboard. So you could really, boom, dig a shot in there. And if you hit it really good, a knuckle would pop in, and you get that dopamine hit from the auditory crack. So I used that as my bags. I didn't have bags, right? And one day, one of my dad's best friends and also client, this guy Joey, says, hey, Mitch, his 15-year-old son, is having a bully issue. Would you teach him some stuff? And I said, yeah, sure. And so I start teaching Mitchell. And what am I teaching him? I'm teaching him some wrestling, some kicking from Taekwondo, and some boxing. Those are the three arts that I had actually been training in. It
was like
regularly.
UFC, basically.
it was. I think there were a lot of guys around the world blending stuff. Kaja Kempo is a blend of things, and of course Jeet Kune Do blends stuff. Bruce Lee's art.
Yeah.
So that was mixed martial art in that sense of blending, and so 3 months later, which is an ironic time for anybody who knows how long a typical fighter will prep for a fight is 3 months.
Yeah.
3 months later, Mitch gets into the fight with this kid at school. Now, this is kind of the actual origin story for my philosophical shift from learning martial arts for self-defense and reverse engineering scenarios for self-defense. That's an important distinction. I'm teaching Mitch this stuff. Up until now, the bullying had been verbal abuse. Now, back in 1980, the world was a different place. It was suck it up, go tell the teacher, don't be a pussy. Why don't you just punch him? Years later, we discovered how much like emotional abuse can really impact people,
Right.
From PTSD to suicide to it's gotten to serious things. And there's probably I think society's gotten a lot softer. So that sort of stuff impacts us in but that's probably a different podcast and a different discussion. But back then it was, you got a bully problem, I'm going to hire a guy who I know who is a martial artist to teach you to defend yourself. That was the dad's fix.
Yeah. Yeah.
School wasn't doing anything. I was always a very ethically inclined person. My integrity has never been for sale. And I would tell Mitchell, because he's 15, he's full of testosterone. He's going, you go, hey, Coach Blauer, when can I hit this guy? I go, Mitchell, maybe never. He's an asshole. You're not going to sucker punch this guy. That's not what we do. Right now, he hasn't touched you. You just ignore him and avoid him. And the school's not doing anything. But one day, if he touches you, that's when you legally can defend yourself.
Yeah.
Don't let someone grab your neck. Don't let somebody shove you. Right. And I said, if he hasn't touched you yet, so right now you're just going to avoid. And, like a month later, he'd go, this guy's really getting on my nerves, coach. Like, when can I? And I remember saying to him, Peter, I said, Mitch, do you know to move your head properly or block or strike or slip? He's like, not really. I said, do you know how to strike really fast and hard? He goes, no, I'm just learning. I said, well, until you learn how to strike and defend yourself, I suggest you don't get into a physical fight. It was like very, very matter of fact, you have no talent or skill right now. I would avoid this as long as possible. So almost to the day, 3 months later, Mitch is late for class. Remember, he's 15, he's running through school. And this kid sees him. He's sitting at the back against some locker banks. And I used to give this kid Mitchell private lessons at his house. So I come in for the private lesson. Here's how I find out about it. He's sitting there like this. I go, what's up? What's going on? And he erupts. He goes, motherfucker, I go, hey, calm down, man. What's going on? What happened? He tells me he's late for class. He's running for class. And this kid trips him, right? And he goes flying in front of a bunch of people. His books go flying. He goes flying. He's embarrassed. And he gets up and he's kind of erupts. He's like, you fucking asshole. Like, he's swearing at the guy. And Mitch had never asserted himself up until that point. He just kind of like, I'm not seeing this. And the guy go, what did you say? And he steps up and he walks, he encroaches Mitchell. And Mitch looks at him, he goes, you've been bugging me since school started. I don't even know like who you are. Like, what the hell? Like, leave me alone. And the guy goes, what are you going to do? And he pokes him, that bully shot that pokes him, right? And Mitchell just loses at that point, and he grabs the guy. And he's describing, he said, and he shoved me. He says, and then I lost it. I grabbed him and I slammed him against a locker bank. And I screamed, I said, don't ever touch me. And Mitchell stops the story there, Peter. And I go, and he goes, puts his head down. He goes, he dropped me with a left hook. I'm like, dude, what do you mean he dropped you with a left hook? Like, why didn't you check it? Why didn't you parry it? Why didn't you slip it? Why didn't you do any of the stuff we did? And he looks at me and he goes, well, and you could see him like reliving it. He goes, I was holding him with my left hand on his shirt. And he goes, I had all my books in my hand. And in that moment, imagine if you had to box somebody and I said, grab his shirt and hold your gym bag. How soon until you get punched in the face? Well, the answer is right away. You immediately get punched in the face because you've tied up both your blocking and striking tools. So, but in the moment, here's what happened. And this is the coolest thing as far as like ignition for an idea. And I've explained this story many times. It was like the God of self-defense struck me with a lightning bolt. And I said, oh my God, we teach self-defense wrong.
Right.
And when I said we, I was benevolently including everybody in the world. I was like an aficionado. I studied everything. I had a book collection of all martial arts. Almost every single self-defense and martial art book and study starts from the fight is already on, meaning it's active self-defense. If you know you're boxing somebody Friday night, right? And you go, yeah, let's fight Friday night, 7:00 at the gym. And Thursday, he walks up to you at the gas station while you're pumping gas and goes, you ready for tomorrow? And you go, yeah. And he goes, wham, and he slam. He's going to hit you because you're not ready for the fight now, you're ready for the fight in 24 hours. When we learn any type of martial art, we say things, and I know this. If the guy has a knife, do this. If the guy has you in a headlock, do this. If the guy goes to tackle you, do this. So think about this. To practice all of those moves, I have to practice all of the counters, I need to let the attack happen.
Yeah.
The way neuroscience really works is this. Your brain is part hard drive, and it's memorizing everything that it thinks is important. But there's a part of your brain that's always trying to predict the future. There's a part of your brain always trying to guess what the weather's going to be. Is dinner going to be good? Is this going to be a good meal? Am I going to get laid tonight? Am I getting fired tomorrow? The brain is always trying to predict the future. And it's an interesting way to look at it. You know, if you understand that deeply in terms of like self-awareness. In the self-defense world, this is important because there's another part of your brain, and you probably know this, and if you don't, I'll just give you a light overview. The neuroscience of learning a skill set requires repetition. You decide this is a practical skill. It could be a deadlift. It could be a jab. It could be a snatch. It could be a running technique. When you decide this is important, I'm going to do it, you myelinate, you create myelination, which is this sheath that connects to neurons, and that becomes your neural program. What a lot of people misinterpret, there's no such thing as muscle memory in the truest sense, but what they call muscle memory, it's a neural pattern, what you've learned. So get this. When I practice how to kick, how to block, how to strike, I'm creating neural patterns. But those neural patterns are triggered when I see a movement pattern that tells my brain, you know what to do here. So think about this. We do things like, what would you do if a guy gets you in a headlock and your brain downloads what it's learned? If it hasn't learned anything, somebody on this call goes, I don't know what to do. Well, they would freeze because their brain has nothing to download. Somebody who's downloaded something or somebody who's trained something will download stuff. So you remember the 10,000 hour metaphor, right?
Yeah.
You know, Macklemore made it really famous. Gladwell made it really famous.
Yeah. 10,000 to be an expert. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was based on a study by a researcher named Erickson in Europe. And without getting into what the 10,000 hour metaphor became, basically, if you do anything, basically they said, if you do something for the magic number seemed to be 10,000 hours, you attain mastery of that. Guitar, boxing, whatever it was. They studied Gretzky, they studied the Beatles, blah, blah, blah. So what I tell people, I go, look, if you do anything 10,000 times, you're going to get good at it. The problem is, and this is one of our maxims from our system, be careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing.
Yeah. Be
careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing. And some people, Peter, think like I'm insulting them or their approach to something. What I'm actually, and I've always been talking about is, no, it's neuroscience. That you're myelinating the neuron to move a certain way. And if what you did is less desirable, then what you've done is you compounded the problem you're in. The bigger thing is this: if you do 10,000 reps of how to get out of a headlock or how to do a gun disarm or what to do if somebody mounts you, in order to practice that move, you have to do, and this is the kicker, 10,001 reps of letting somebody do that move. So you're always, when you're practicing the ethical counter, you're always practicing more reps than the actual counter, right? Because you got to start with, okay, throw the punch. I'm going to slip. So without getting too deep in the weeds, and I think I've already screwed that up.
No, you're doing great.
Is this, and I love this part of the neuroscience. If I create a pattern, so if I ask a Taekwondo guy, what would you do if somebody was in your personal space threatening you? The Taekwondo guy is never going to say, I'm going to double leg him and take him to the ground, because his programming is kicking predominantly.
Yeah.
If I say to the boxer, what do you do, guys, in your space? The boxer will never say, I'm going to step back and kick him.
Right.
Because he has an unconscious bias through the myelinization of the neuron, the practice, the motor pattern of going, hey man, and throwing the body shot or the uppercut or whatever. And if I say to the MMA guy who has practiced double leg, take him down, ground and pound, choke him out, he's not gonna say, well, I'm gonna step to 2 o'clock, get to the guy's outside, secure his arm. He's not gonna do something that he hasn't practiced. He's not gonna visualize that. So I guess, and I could talk about this shit for way longer than the podcast, but because it fascinates me, the brain part fascinates me. And that's how we hack learning, is we understand how the brain works. So we program people, we show them natural movements that are part of a natural program in their body and a motor recruitment pattern that they already have. For example, if you put your seatbelt on 10,000 times, that's the same range of motion as an elbow. If you do, look, your members in Pharos, how many push-ups, somebody who's been training with you for a year, how many push-ups have they done in a year? Both in warming up and in warm-up.
They've done at least 100 a week for a year.
Right? So what is that? Right? 6,000?
Yeah.
Push-ups?
A lot.
So for those of you listening to this who've never done any self-defense, the kinetic chain of a push-up is the same as a palm strike. It's almost the same as a strike. The safest way to hit somebody in self-defense is with your palm, not with your fist. You like boxing, I like boxing, but fists and wrists are the most broken part of any fighter's anatomy. So boxers regularly sprain and break, fracture hands, sprain wrists, and they're using a wrap and then tape and a glove, and they're still hurting their hand.
Right.
So you tie this into my system, which is weaponizing the startle flinch. When you get scared, your hands open up and you push away danger. You're already loaded the push-up position, the platform's there. The missing link in the training, and this is what we do in our training, is we connect fear and aggression.
Right.